Hello there, it's Sarah from Paper Lovely. Thanks for joining me today. I'm back with the second part of the 10 cards 1 kit collaboration I did with Stephanie Harding, and today I'm using all of the goodies she sent in her kit. Here I'm giving you a quick look at what was included. I'll have a full list of supplies at my blog post for you, and we'll of course link to Stephanie's channel so you can check out what she came up with using the kit. As a thank you for checking out both our videos, Stephanie picked up an additional stamp set to give away. Make sure you go check out her video to get the instructions on how to enter. So let's jump into card number 1. Here I've got this beautiful flower paper. This was my favorite that came in the paper pack. And I just trimmed that out there with my MFT Blueprints 32 frame die. That's going to give me a background that measures 5 by 3 3/4. And I placed that down there with my ATG gun onto the front of my card base. My card base is made from MFT's Poppy cardstock, and there you can see I've got an extra piece of that. I took one of those cut aparts from the 12 by 12 sheet and just placed that down and trimmed out a little bit of a red border there, just about 1/8 of an inch, and then popped that up with some Scotch foam tape. So I'll go ahead and peel away the backing, and then I'm going to center that on the front of my card base. For the inside of the card, I've got a Nina panel trimmed to 4 by 5 1/4, and I went with the sentiment "Enjoy the Day." Here I'm stamping this out using Lawn Fawn Minty Fresh ink. I thought this blue matched the blue in the flowers on the background of my card front really well. And then there you see I also grabbed that potted plant and stamped that in the corner. I'll go ahead then and place that on the inside of my card base, and that will complete card number 1. For card number 2, I took this gray paper and trimmed that down to 4 by 5 1/4, and I'm not sure exactly what you would call this, if it's drafting paper or just houseplan paper, but I went ahead and trimmed that down, and then there was a matching stripe that came on one of the cut apart pages, and I pulled that out since it was the same pattern, only opposite. I used my ATG gun there to add that towards the bottom of my panel and then place the panel on top of my card base. And this card base is made from MFT's cement gray cardstock. There you can see I went with the sentiment "Welcome Home," and I stamped that out using my Simon Says Stamp Intense black ink. And then I grabbed one of the wooden keys that she had sent and added a little bit of Nuvo glue behind that, and I'm just going to place that off to the side of that "Welcome Home" sentiment. For the inside, I've again got a Nina panel trimmed to 4 by 5 1/4, and I went with the sentiment "Home Sweet Home," again stamping that with Simon Says Stamp Intense black ink. And then I grabbed one of the leftover strips of that same pattern paper from the front, and I'm just going to add that across the bottom to mimic the front of my card. I'll place that on the inside of my card base, and that will complete card number 2. For card number 3, I wanted to play around with this layout a little bit. I really loved this cut apart, and I liked these two colors because I thought it would make a great masculine card. So I went ahead and started with that sort of reddish maroon color, and I trimmed that to 4 by 5 1/4. And then here you see I've got that black and white check, and I'm just playing around with how I'd like that to line up. What I ended up doing was taking it in, and from that bottom corner, I went 1/2 inch up and 1/2 inch in, just leaving that border around the edge there. And then I'll go ahead and trim that again down to 4 by 5 1/4. Here I've got that cut apart, and to make that a little bit sturdier, I went ahead and put some scrap cardstock behind it and just retrimmed that out. This measures just about 3 by 4 inches. And then there you'll see I went ahead and backed that with some Scotch foam tape, and I did again put that all the way across rather than doing my usual 3 stripes, just to make it a little bit sturdier, so that if I want to mail this, it will get through okay. So place that down there, and then I wanted to add a little something more. So I pulled some twine out of my stash, and there you'll see I used some 1/2 inch Scor-Tape. I've doubled over that twine, and I'm going to place that along the Scor-Tape just to hold it in place. And then I'll pull that around to the front, and I'm just sort of fiddling with that a little bit. I wanted to go right across that line where the check paper and the maroon paper meet. So there you'll see I've just pulled that, and I'm just going to tie that into a knot, and then I will trim the edges. Then just to help that stay a little more securely, I'm going to add a glue dot just behind that knot there, and then I'll add one on either end to keep it from popping up too much. And I'm going to go ahead then and place that on the top of my card base. And this is again made from MFT's cement gray cardstock. For the inside, I've again got a Nina panel trimmed to 4 by 5 1/4, and I'm stamping out the sentiment "Enjoy the Day" using Lawn Fawn walnut ink. And I just kept that pretty plain. Here I'll add some ATG, and then I'll place that on the inside of my card base. And that will complete card number 3. For card number 4, I'm starting with this pretty black floral paper, and I've trimmed that down to 4 by 5 1/4. There I just placed that on top of my card base using my ATG gun. And then this welcome home sentiment is actually from the front of the paper pad. I just went ahead and trimmed that out. There was one on the front and one on the back, and I thought I'm going to use it rather than throw it away. So I trimmed that out, and here I'm backing that on some MFT Jelly Bean Green cardstock. And I've just left maybe a 1/16 of an inch border around that. Then here I've trimmed down this picket fence to just match the width of my card, and I added some Nuvo glue to the back of each of the pickets there, and I'm just going to add on a stack of my acrylic blocks to help that glue down nice and tight. While that's drying, I'm going to work on the inside. I've got this Nina panel trimmed to 4 by 5 1/4. And I'm stamping out the sentiment "Home Sweet Home" using my Simon Says Stamp Intense black ink. And then I grabbed another one of those flower pots, and I'm going to stamp that out using Stampin' Up's Old Olive. Now that my glue has dried, I'm going to take my ATG gun and I'll attach the sentiment. And then I'll place in my inside panel. And that will complete card number 4. I love that picket fence. It gave some really, really great dimension. So for card number 5, I've trimmed down this wood grain panel to 4 by 5 1/4. There I'm attaching it to my card base, and that is made from MFT's Antique White. There you saw I grabbed that beautiful wreath that Stephanie sent, and I just placed that down so I would help guide me where to put my sentiment, and I went with the sentiment gather. Here I'm going to stamp that out using Simon Says Stamp Intense Black ink. And then while I had my stamping out, I went ahead and grabbed my Nina panel for the inside of my card. And I'm going to stamp on that the Welcome Home sentiment, again using the Simon Says Stamp Intense Black ink. I also stamped out the flower pots. I'm going to do a little bit of fussy cutting here. So I first stamped them using Stampin' Up's Old Olive. And then here I am using Lawn Fawn Hippo to get a gray sort of silvery color for the buckets that they're in. So I'm going to go ahead and trim these out. From the gray, I'm just going to trim out the bucket portion, and I'll leave a little bit of a white line around the bottom and the sides, and then at the top I'm going to cut that as close as I can to the gray color. That way it'll look continuous when I place them together. And then for the top, I went ahead again and trimmed around, leaving a little bit of a white edge around the leaves. And then I just cut the bottom portion into a V so that I could add a little bit of blue and then place the bucket on top. So for the inside panel, I'm going to go ahead and glue down those flower pots. And I'll just place a stamp block there to keep those down nice and tight while they're drying. And then I grabbed my wreath, and I'm going to use some glue dots to hold that on the front. So I was really generous with these because this was an extra thick wreath. So I probably did between 10 and 12 around the entire back of that. And then I just placed it down. And I noticed one of my flowers was missing a center, and I could not find it anywhere in the bag that the wreath came in. So I just used one of my little black enamel dots and stuck that in the center. You can't even really tell. Here I attached my inside panel, and that will complete card number 5. For card number 6, I'm again going to use my Blueprints 32 frame die and trim out a panel from this sort of lattice or chain link type of paper. And then here I've got another one of those strips from that cut apart piece of paper. So I went ahead and used my ATG gun and placed that down. Then I cut a length of this black and white striped ribbon. There I'm going to add some Scor-Tape to the back of that. That is 1/4 inch Scor-Tape. Then I'm just going to run my bone folder down that to make sure it's stuck nice and tight. That makes it much easier to peel the backing off. And then I'll place that down underneath that border. Then I took one more small length of that ribbon, and I'm just going to make a little bow by tying a knot, and then I'll just angle edges on either side. I'll go ahead and place my panel down on the top of my card base, and this card base is made from MFT's Orange Fizz. It's a little hard to tell in the video, I think, but this orange matches the little flowers inside that flower pot perfectly. And then I kept this really simple. I just went with the sentiment high, and I'm stamping that out using my Intense Black ink. And then here I grabbed my little bow and placed a glue dot behind that knot. For the inside, I again just left this really simple. I just used the frame that was cut out when I did the background panel for the front and trimmed off 2 of the sides there. And here I've attached some 1/8 inch score tape behind that. I'm just going to take a Nina panel and I'll go ahead and line those both up towards the bottom. I'll go ahead then and place that panel on the inside of my card base. And that will complete card number 6. So for card number 7, I've taken a stripe of that cement colored paper, and I'm just going to take this flower pot paper and attach that to the top of that using some ATG gun. And then I've got another one of those stripes from the cut apart. This one reads, "Home is where you are loved the most." I thought that was really pretty. And here I've taken and popped that up using some Scotch foam tape. So I'm going to peel away the backing there, and then I'm going to center that right over top of where those 2 different pattern papers meet. Oh, but before that, I did take my Memento Tuxedo black marker and just run that along the edges. The core of this paper was white, so since my sentiment, or since the edge of that sentiment was black, I wanted to color the edges so you didn't quite have that white peeking out on either side. So there, I'll center that in between where the 2 papers meet and then trim off the excess. And then I grabbed some twine from my stash and I've added a glue dot to the back, and I'm just going to leave enough there because I want to be able to tie a bow when I'm finished. But I'm going to wrap that around, 1, 2, looks back, I wrapped it around 6 times. And here, that last edge I'm going to again secure with a glue dot. And then I've spared you my bow tying skills, but I just knotted that and then looped it into a bow. And here I'm using another glue dot to secure that down. Then I'll take that whole panel and place that on the top of my card base. This is again an MFT card base made from primitive white cardstock. For the inside, I decided to stamp directly on the card base. This has a really pretty speckled pattern to it, so I wanted to let that show. And there you'll see I went with a sentiment "Welcome Home," and I again stamped that using Simon Says Stamp Intense black ink. Here I've got another strip of that flower pot paper, and I've trimmed that to 5 inches just for something a little different with the stripe. I left about 1/4 inch edge on either the sides and the bottom of that stripe. And that will complete card number 7. For card number 8, I wanted to make a shaker card. So there you'll see I'm using again that "Welcome Home," and this is what I cut off of the back of the pattern paper. So I went ahead again and used that tuxedo black marker just to make sure that my edges were nice and dark. And here I'm going to place that down on this blue pattern paper. I trimmed this down to, it's roughly 3 by 4 inches. I did end up trimming it just slightly smaller to fit inside the shaker pouch. And this is part of a We Are Memory Keepers album page. I just buy the whole page, which probably has 10 or 12 different openings on it, and then trim that down into pockets that I can slide all my elements into, and that way in most cases I only have to fuse 1 or 2 ends of the pouch rather than having to do the whole thing. So there I've added in some sequins, and this is the Tailored Expressions Snow Flurry mix, and then I'm also adding in one of those wooden keys. I've had my fuse tool heating up really well off to the side. I usually let this heat for a few full minutes, because the hotter it is, the easier it is to use. And then I'm just going nice and slow to seal up that last edge of the pocket. And remember, this is at 2 times normal speed, so you want to keep that nice and slow to make sure you get a good melt on that edge so nothing will fall out. Here I've got a card base made from MFT's blueberry cardstock, and I'm using this really pretty script paper, just leaving about 1/2 inch of the bottom of that blue cardstock showing. Then of course I trimmed off the excess, and here I'm starting to lay out my scene. So these were some really pretty leaves that Stephanie had included in with the wreath. And so I'm just going to make sort of a little base to stick my shaker window on. So I ended up trimming down all of these 2 into 4. I'm going to place the larger pieces down first. I'm just using some glue dots for that. And then to make it look a little bit fuller, I went ahead and grabbed the smaller edges, and I'm going to place those in the opposite direction just to create a little bit more of sort of a base there for my shaker window to sit on. And I'll again secure those both with glue dots. Now when I make a shaker window, I like to make it so that my recipient can take the shaker off and reuse it on another card or for scrapbooking or whatever they want. So I like to place removable glue dots behind that. So here I'm just using a strip of 3 of those. And they can be kind of tricky to get off of that slick surface. So I always take my bone folder and just rub that over each of the dots individually. That'll help it stick down a little better. And then I'll place that there on the top of my card base. For the inside, I'm again working on a Nina panel trimmed to 4 by 5 1/4, and I went with the sentiment Home Sweet Home. I looked in my stash for a color to match that blueberry cardstock, and I ended up finding a very old color box chalk type of ink. And this is called Blue Iris. So I had to really press to get a nice color with that. It was so old, but it matched almost perfectly. I was really pleased with how that turned out. And that will complete card number 8. For card number 9, I'm using the shiplap paper, and I'm trimming that out with my Blueprints 32 frame die. I really wanted to use some of these icon brads. I thought they were so much fun. So here I'm just playing around, creating a little scene with that alarm clock and the pot and the house and the phone. And now I've grabbed my We Are Memory Keepers brad setter, and I'm just where those brads are making little holes in my paper so that I'll know where to place everything. And I do have a piece of cardboard behind where I'm working there, just so that my piercing tool doesn't run into my cutting mat. And then there I'm going to go through those holes just a little bit deeper to make it easier to place the brads. So I sort of have them layered, which is why I'm going a little bit out of order. I wanted certain ones to be in front of the others. But if you've never used this brad setter, it is a lot of fun. It makes it so much easier. You just run the sort of triangle portion of that down in between the 2 sides of the brad and then off to each side, and it puts it in there really nice and tight for you. And then I wanted to make sure this was nice and sturdy and wouldn't have any sort of lumps or bumps on the front panel. So I added some Scotch foam tape behind that, and I did do 5 stripes to cover the whole thing so it would be nice and even and very easy to mail if I want to. And then my little paper pieces that went with the brads were moving around on me just slightly, so I took some glue dots and placed those behind them just to make sure they would stay where I wanted them. And then I grabbed another one of those cut aparts from the 12 by 12 sheet and just trimmed out that inside sentiment that says home is wherever I'm with you. And I'm backing that on some MFT lemon drop cardstock, just leaving about 1/16 of an edge on that. And then I'll use my ATG gun to place that on top of my Nina panel, just using my Misty grid there to make sure I've got it nice and centered. And I think I forgot to mention, but this card base is made from MFT's Summer Splash cardstock. I'll go ahead then and add my inside panel. And that will complete card number 9. So for card number 10, I am back to this beautiful floral paper. I got 2 of it in the pack, so I thought I'm going to use it again because I loved it so much. And I trimmed it out using my Blueprints 32 frame die. Here I'm going to create another sequin pouch, and I'm using again one of those cut aparts that says "You Are My Home." Here I'm going to add in some sequins, and these are Lucy's Little Thing Robin's Egg mix, and it's very pretty. It has some beautiful iridescent colors, as well as then some little heart cutouts that are stuck in there as well. So here I wanted to add a little bit more texture, so I grabbed that twine again. I added a little bit of ATG at the top and the bottom of my panel. I'm just going to wrap that around a few times. And here I'll grab my ATG gun and I'm going to attach that panel to the top of my card base. And this is again a card base made from MFT's Summer Splash cardstock. Then I grabbed another piece of this twine and I'm going to double that over to create a bow. Again, sparing you my bow tying skills. And then here I'll grab a glue dot and place that behind the center, and I'll pop that on top of those lines of string off to the side there. Again, I'm going to use my removable glue dots on the back of my pouch so that my recipient can take this off and use it for something else. And then I'll place that down on top of my card base. For the inside, I'm again working on my trusty Nina panel trimmed to 4 by 5 1/4. And I'm going to stamp out the sentiment Home Sweet Home. I'm using that Stampin' Up! Old Olive ink. And then to finish that off, I took a scrap of that floral paper. It measures just about 1/2 inch. And I'm going to place that towards the bottom of my panel. I'll place that on the inside of my card base. And that will complete card number 10. Here is a quick look back at the cards from today. Don't forget to click the link to Stephanie's channel below so you can check out what she created with the kit and enter to win the stamp set. You'll find additional photos as well as a full list of supplies at my blog post, linked in the description below. If you enjoyed the video, please leave me a comment or a thumbs up and subscribe for more. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.